Capture the Kremlin is the goal that an ex-Russian lawmaker has called for. A former Russian lawmaker has spoken out against President Vladimir Putin's administration in an interview that came out on Friday. While addressing his concerns with the Kremlin, Ilya Ponomarev, a former member of Russia's State Duma, made the recommendation to the Moscow Times. Following his 2016 arrest on embezzlement accusations in his own country, Ponomarev fled to Ukraine, where he is now living in exile. He said that the accusations were driven by political motives. Reportedly, he acts as a spokeswoman for the National Republican Army, NRA, in Kyiv. The NRA is a paramilitary group with claimed Russian connections that seeks to depose Putin. Even in his capacity as a Russian MP, Ponomarev was perceived as having some oppositional views. Russian President Vladimir Putin's 2014 invasion of Crimea and Russia's so-called gay propaganda law were both opposed by him, making him the lone State Duma member to vote against them, according to Ponomarev, who spoke to the Moscow Times. The only way to bring about real change in Russia is to remove Putin's government from the Kremlin. My best guess is that 20% of Russians are staunchly in favor of the conflict in Ukraine, 20% are firmly opposed, and the remaining 80% are on the fence. This 60% is our population, he added. The key to unleashing their full potential is seizing control of the Kremlin, Ponomarev continued. Other ways do not exist. On Friday night, Newsweek emailed the Kremlin to get a comment. The current leader of Russia, Ponomarev, remarked, "Putin is not as strong as he looks. He's a rich man, but money doesn't buy you friends who would fight and die for you," said him. "It buys you business partners." In his book Does Putin Have to Die?, published in 2022, Ponomarev argued for a coup d'état, as pointed out by the Moscow Times. The account of Russia's transition to democracy following its defeat at the hands of Ukraine, Ponomarev has previously told Newsweek that Putin would pass away in the year 2023. Putin is powerful because he is an alpha guy, because he is unbeatable. In 2022, this status began to decline. Ponomarev stated in an interview released in January 2023 with Newsweek, "My forecast still remains that he will not see his next birthday." He made the statement Putin lived to celebrate his 71st birthday on October 7, disproving his prediction. In an interview with the Moscow Times, Ponomarev stated that he had no plans to run for president of Russia, despite his strong support for a coup d'état to bring about more democratic elections. "I see myself as the mastermind behind the political transition," stated the politician. If the individual responsible for creating the transition phase is also running for office, there is a strong temptation for them to manipulate the system to ensure their victory. A potential bias has arisen. Russia's Baltic neighbors are constructing a string of bunkers along their borders with Russia and Belarus to fortify their border defenses. Building anti-mobility defensive installations on the borders with Russia and Belarus will soon be underway, according to a Friday release from the Estonian Defense Ministry, which also included Latvia and Lithuania as Baltic nations. Friday in Riga, the defense ministers of Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, Hanno Pevkur, Arvydas Anasauskas, and Andris Spruds, respectively, inked an agreement to construct the bunkers in the coming years. Tensions are rising among NATO, Russia, and Belarus as a result of the continuing conflict in Ukraine, prompting this step. Despite Belarus's close relations to Russia and its recent threats to the strategic alliance, all three Baltic republics are members of NATO. On October 22, 2022, fences were seen along the international boundary between the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad and Lithuania at Vistitis, Lithuania. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia's military chiefs inked a deal on Friday to construct a string of bunkers along their borders with Belarus and Russia. Gallup, Sean, to build the anti-mobility defensive installations is a carefully considered and thought-out project, the need of which stems from the current security situation, Pevkur stated. Russia's war in Ukraine has shown that, in addition to equipment, ammunition, and manpower, physical defensive installations on the border are also needed to defend Estonia from the first meter, according to him. Pevkur continued by saying that the installations will put a stop to conflicts by making the military ready for various developments more promptly in the event that the slightest risk emerged. The Russian Ministry of Defense and the Belarusian embassy in Washington, D.C. were contacted by Newsweek by email on Friday for a comment. A network of bunkers, support points, and distribution lines would make up the installations, according to the Estonian Defense Ministry. However, during peacetime, no explosives, cutting wires, or other obstacles would be present. The Baltic nations have reportedly inked a letter of intent to share the use of the HIMARS multiple rocket launcher systems, which are American-made, in both peace and wartime, and to carry out NATO air policing in Latvia, according to the ministry. A statement from the Estonian military stated that the initiative was prompted by the 2022 NATO summit in Madrid, Spain, where the leaders of the alliance emphasized that allies must be ready to defend the territory from the first meter and new regional defense plans must be developed. Despite Putin's claims that he has no reason to fight with NATO countries, the Baltic states and Russia's relationship with NATO have been precariously balanced ever since Putin's invasion of Ukraine, according to a U.S. research tank called the Institute for the Study of War, ISW. Putin's recent statements regarding Russia's Baltic neighbors were meant to set information conditions for future escalations that might undermine NATO, according to an earlier report this week. A new military doctrine permitting the use of nuclear weapons supplied by Russia was unveiled earlier this week by Belarus. In a warning to NATO on Friday, Belarusian Defense Minister Viktor Kremlin stated that Belarusians are prepared to defend their country with all forces and means.